and welcome back to Workshop Wednesday. I'm Chelsea Pussy-Mary. Thanks for joining me today in my workshop, and today I'm working on this beautiful vintage gown. Now, this gown belongs to the grandmother of my client, and she is getting me to do some adjustments to it because her wedding is coming up here in October and she wants to wear her grandmother's gown. Now, I love alterations and doing pattern adjustments both together to really understand fit. When you're looking at garments, pre-existing garments, maybe tweaks that you'll need to make during the garment making process, whether you're making a muslin or making the actual garment, there's often little fine tuning that you need to do during the process, as well as the more comfortable you get with fitting, garment adjusting, and my favorite technique, flat pattern measurements, to just avoid even needing to do that muslin, then you'll get a lot of information from both looking at the patterns and looking at garments and the adjustments that you make to pre-existing garments. So let's take a look at this garment right here. I wanted to talk today about this shoulder seam. So you can see my pins along the neckline here, and I need to take up this shoulder. Now you might also notice that it's just a tiny little bit up at the neck and quite a bit more down towards the shoulder. So there's a couple things that we're adjusting here. One, we're adjusting the length from the shoulder, the top of the shoulder, down to the bust point. The distance in between the horizontal line of the bust and then the top of the pattern, the shoulder seam, is off. There's a little bit too much length for my client compared to her grandmother. For her grandmother, this was the correct length, obviously, since this was her gown that she wore. The other thing that we're adjusting is the shoulder pitch. Since we're taking more off the outside of the shoulder compared to the inside, the granddaughter also has more of a slanted or sloped shoulder. Getting to know what your shoulder pitch is and comparing that to the patterns that you work with. Different patterns will have different pitch levels depending on the style. You may not need to adjust it, but oftentimes to get that really good fit without getting any kind of drag lines around the armpit, that kind of thing, you'll want to check both your shoulder pitch, and as I always teach, you'll want to measure in between those horizontal lines to make sure that the spacing is correct. I was just looking at some comments from another client recently, and she was just mentioning that she's petite, but petite patterns don't fit her because they're too tiny. She needs regular patterns, but shorter. So what you're going to want to do is, if that's the case for you, is really shorten up the distance in between your horizontal lines. Now, for my client here, the distance between her bust and her waist is correct. Everything else fit really well by the time I just brought up the shoulders and changed that shoulder pitch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on both sides, but just like in this case, in the case of anything you might be adjusting, you'll also need to look at adjoining seams. So here for this adjustment, I'm adjusting both the front and the back symmetrically. That really kept that shoulder seam straight along the shoulder. Sometimes you may find that you just need to remove length out of the front. If it's the garment is built to accommodate a fuller bust, then you might just need to pull up the length in the bust. The back might be all balanced, the distance from the shoulder to the horizontal lines, but there might just be too much length in the front. If you have a full chest, you might need extra length in the front, but not in the back. In this scenario, in this case, I did it here symmetrically. Now, when we take this length out of the shoulder here, you'll also notice that the armhole is smaller. If it's a sleeveless top and that armhole isn't too tight for you, you can just finish it off as per regular. If you had a facing, you'd need to adjust your facing as well so that it would be the correct length. But in the case of this garment, I actually have a sleeve. She's got these beautiful long sleeves with a little point over her hand. That's pretty cute. And so you'll see here that the sleeve head is too large. The sleeve itself needs to either be adjusted, or we need to adjust the armhole, cut it down a little bit lower, a little bit larger, in the end just recreate the original armhole lower down so that the sleeve fits in. The other option would be to take in the sleeve the same amount that we're taking in the shoulder. So we wouldn't take it at the shoulder because there is no seam in the sleeve there. You'd want to make that sleeve a little bit narrower from the seam. So that would be an option. Or the third option would be to ease in that sleeve if it's not too much material. And in the case of this lace, since lace is very porous, there's the holes in it, it's really easy to ease in quite a large amount without it starting to pucker. That's always the thing. You've got to kind of keep your eye out when you're easing something together, that it doesn't pucker on you when you've eased that extra length onto a shorter seam. Now in the case of a sleeve, I don't know if you've ever set in a sleeve, you might have noticed that there's often a little bit of extra length in the stitch line of the sleeve compared to the armscye. And this just helps those shoulders to kind of round out and fall nicely over the shoulder and not kind of have a square edge or a cornered edge in the drape of the sleeve. So it's often really nice to have at least a little bit of extra length to ease in that sleeve. So the first thing that I'm going to try with this client is, after I've done the shoulder adjustment, I'm going to just pin the sleeve in and see how the fullness looks, how the drape of the sleeve is, and if I can possibly just ease it in. I'm going to choose this option first just because this lace actually doesn't have a lot of stretch to it. It's an older lace, like 60 years old, so it's going to be a little bit more delicate and brittle, and I don't want the sleeve then to be too tight when the bride goes to hug her family. We don't want to rip those sleeves, so having that little bit of extra fullness I think will serve her really well in this case. So we're gonna give that a try first, and then if we need, then I'm gonna go with cutting the armhole bigger, because again, I don't want to tighten up these sleeves too tight for her. But those would be your three options if you needed to kind of match up those sleeves back to your garment after you've done a shoulder adjustment like this. So I'm gonna run and get this adjustment kind of done, and then we'll take another look at how the finished product looks. Okay, here we go. Check this out. I just set this sleeve back in, and you can just see how the shoulder itself, the sleeve seam is right here, and then the shoulder just kind of rounds out over top of the arm and into the sleeve. And honestly, this sleeve is sitting really, really beautifully. You would never guess that I took it up that extra 1.5 centimeters on either side. So like a full 3 centimeters, which is over an inch of length. So I took out over an inch of length in the armscye itself, and then just ease the sleeve in. And I definitely didn't stretch that armscye because there was already original kind of stabilizing stitching around it so that it wouldn't stretch out at all when the sleeve was placed in. And this sleeve just sits really, really lovely in here. There's no puckering, and yeah, I just really do think that the shoulder, the way it rounds over, is going to sit really nicely on the client for sure. Now, if you do find that the armscye is cutting into your arm or just pinching, then you may want to cut yours rather than just easing that sleeve in. And depending on the fabric, you might not be able to ease that full 1 inch in. And this is why aligning your sewing variables is just number one and key to really getting a good fit, creating garments that look professional and not homemade. Is that fabrics and patterns and styles and bodies, they're all different, and it's not like the grandma was right or the granddaughter was right or the pattern was right. It's like it needs to be adjusted to the body that's wearing it and the different fabrics. Like a wool, for example, even a woven wool, you might be able to get that amount of fabric in, or maybe a really coarse weave, a looser weave might work as well. Knit possibly as well, but there's a lot of other materials like a tighter weave, a finer weave, depending on the fiber it's made out of, different things like that. You would never be able to ease that length into a seam of this length without it being too much or puckering. So in that case, you would definitely either need to take in the sleeve, cut the armscye larger. And actually, a little bonus tip here, if you are a little nervous about adjusting arm size, especially if you have a pattern and it's not just a garment you're adjusting from the store, then just copy that same armscye lower down. So after you've removed whatever needs to come off the shoulder, slide that pattern down so that the stitch line matches up with your new stitch line and the seam allowance edge matches up, and then just copy that armscye and it will cut down lower, so the distance between the bottom of that armscye and like your bust, your horizontal bust line, will be closer together, but you'll be just copying exactly the same armscye 1-to-1 lower down, so you know that your sleeve will fit perfectly into it the way the original pattern was designed. But I do always love when the sleeve has that little bit of extra length, but there's always adjusting and variations depending on the garment, depending on the body, depending on the fabric. Well, here we go. I've got both sleeves in now. I've also finished up the neckline and or the new neckline. This gown used to, or jacket for the gown, used to have a collar and a high neck. So we took the collar off, cut it down, and I finished that off as well. And you can just see how the shoulders drape really nicely. You would never guess that they were even adjusted in the slightest. Now that I'm finished with the jacket, I get to move on to the dress. I'm going to do a new overlay for the skirt, and then we'll put it all together and see what it looks like. But that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Workshop Wednesday. As always, if you have any questions or comments on this video, then let me know below. Feel free to join my Facebook group to ask me questions or post any other topics or questions that you have about sewing, fit, and really getting that professional look with your garments when you make them. Take care and happy sewing!